the noise, and welcome back to another episode of Kicking It with Key. And this is our last segment of mindful loving as we seek to get closer to purpose by cutting the noise and using mindfulness, self-love, and self-care as our guide in that process. So I'm so happy that you joined me again to talk about mindful loving, but today we're just going to get some overarching lessons that we've learned from love on this journey of us having conversations about mindfully loving. But we're going to also just kind of throw in some tidbits to help you continue the journey after our conversations in here today. And if you haven't checked out some of the other episodes around mindful loving, make sure you jump back on those and check those out on both YouTube and IGTV, because we've been having some really rich conversations about all the ways that love presents itself in our lives and how we can love more fully. Oh, now that was a mouthful. Let's go ahead and jump into 10 lessons that we can take away from love and maybe even a little bit of loss in that process and move forward and become the mindfully loving people that we need to be and get closer to purpose. All right, so as we've been talking about all about love a lot as our guide, I've also thrown in a little bit about emotional detox, and I have episodes about that, so go back and look at that to guide our conversations. And so I'm going to take a quote directly from Bell Hooks to chat with you about today. It said, "It was love's absence that let me know how much love mattered." And so a lot of our conversations around mindful loving has had a lot to do with what it feels like to have the absence of love and being able to establish what that felt like so that we can move forward into really truly loving each other in the ways that we should. And so the first lesson I want to give to you is that we need a shared definition of love in order to truly be successful in this love thing, okay? And I kind of offered that to you in the first episode, because the reality is if we don't have a shared definition, I may be approaching love from the way that I believe and from my family of origin, but you may be approaching love from another angle. And so it's really important for us to understand and to know how to love each other by having a shared definition. And Bell Hooks talks a lot about how love is not just care and affection, it's a lot of other things. And we've mentioned that in many of the other episodes. So that's your lesson number one. All right, lesson number two. We have all experienced lovelessness. So going back to the quote and thinking about what Bell Hooks said, being able to go to the place or understand the place where we first felt lovelessness, or the places where we feel there's a lack of love in our lives, will only help us to love better. And to be honest with ourselves about the fact that we have experienced lovelessness, and a lot of times it is not our fault that happened. A lot of it happens in childhood. A lot of it happens in our current state because we're still learning how to have a love ethic that feels most in alignment with true love and with perfect love in the way that it talks about in the Bible. So many of us are struggling with that. Lesson number three. And I made a reel about this on Instagram because I thought that it was really important. And in the reel I said, unconditional love includes boundaries. It does. You can love people unconditionally and have some boundaries. Boundaries are spaces of limitation so that you can make sure that your needs are also met. But that does not mean that I do not love you. It does not mean that I do not care for you and I do not trust you and hold you accountable and I'm responsible. It does not mean that I don't have all those things. It means that I love you so much that I want to make sure I don't put you in a position to walk all over my boundaries and then I become resentful towards you. And so keep in mind that you can love unconditionally, you can love the way God intends, you can love, but you also need boundaries in that process. And those boundaries will only put you in a better space to be more giving and more loving. Lesson number 4. And this is going to sound kind of contradictory, but follow me. Self-love cannot flourish in isolation. And this is directly from All About Love. Self-love cannot flourish in isolation. The way that you exercise your self-love oftentimes is in relationship with others. Similar to how you set boundaries. Can you set boundaries with people as an expression of your self-love? Can you let people know what you need as an expression of your self-love? Can you put yourself in the forefront while also holding space for loving fully in your relationships? This is how you exercise self-love. And it puts your self-love to the test when you have to be in relationship with others. And so you continue to flourish and grow if you are utilizing and practicing self-love in relationship with other people. And also, you just provide the space for other people to see you loving yourself so fiercely that they want to love themselves better as well. All right, lesson number 5. Fear is a barrier to love. And honestly, facing our fears is a way that we push ourselves towards love's power. Because when we conquer some of our fears, it helps us to trust more in our love. And a lot of the conversation I've had with you all this week on Instagram and other spaces has been about love or fear. And do you know when you're having a fear response versus a love response in your relationships, in your conversations with yourself? And these are all important to know because, like it says, you know, one of the scriptures says, perfect love casts out fear. And Bell Hooks talks about how when she talks about perfect, she's saying that you're constantly working. Not saying that you're ever going to make it to perfect love, but it's saying that you're constantly working towards growing in love. And that's what we've been doing all month. All right, so lesson number 6 is you need constancy. Love is such a journey. And so it takes constancy and work and constant working it out to get to the place where you want to be in love. But also, oftentimes, especially in this generation, in this culture, in the present society, whatever, we tend to run from pain and discomfort. We don't lean into it. And if you're unable to stick around for a little bit of pain, you will never know love's pleasure because there's going to be some pain because people will disappoint you. You will disappoint yourself. But the reality is love is worth all of that. And I'm not saying take abuse because that's a whole nother situation. But disappointment and pain are going to come along with love because there are going to be a lot of growing pains in that process. But in order for you to know love's pleasure, you have to stick around with people. You can't just cut them off so easily. And I know a lot of us struggle with that because it's the difference between setting a boundary and completely cutting somebody off without even having worked towards anything, without even having talked to them about what the problem was. So it's really important that we get some constancy in our process of loving. Lesson number 7, and this is actually probably my favorite one today because we're talking about mindful remembering. And this is an opportunity for you to evaluate your past from a fresh perspective. And so that you see them as lessons in your process of loving rather than barriers to your loving process. And so as you are mindfully remembering, as you look back at the past and things that may not have gone the way you wanted them to go, or even the past and things that went really well and you want them back, consider how you can look at this situation in a fresh light, how you can glean something new from that circumstance and kind of recreate for yourself what you would have wanted to happen and to learn something from the situation. So as you are mindfully remembering your thoughts, try not to beat yourself up for the things that you did not know. One of my favorite affirmations, which I share with you all often, is I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. And then even presently, I'm doing the best I can with the information I have right now. Because you are, and you will continue to do so. Lesson number 8 is brought to you by compassion and conscious forgiveness. Because many of us have, when we're able to show compassion to ourselves, it is so much easier for us to show compassion in our loving relationships. And it's also easier for us to practice conscious forgiveness, where you choose forgiveness even when it is difficult, because forgiveness is not just about releasing the other person from your anger, resentment, whatever. It's about making sure you have space to love. You will not have space to love if you are constantly holding on to things and not allowing yourself, because you only have a certain amount of energy every day, right? And a lot of the more heavy emotions tend to carry you down and make it really a lot harder. If you ever felt heavy, it might be because you're having an emotion that carries more energy and more heavy energy. So it's important that you lean into compassion and conscious forgiveness, because that's how you get real reconciliation between you and a person that you may have had an issue with. And that's how you get closer to a love ethic that celebrates being mindful, right? And celebrates you getting closer to like feeling free, because love is open, it's neutral, it's freeing. You feel it in your body in that way. And it's a lot lighter than some of this other heavy stuff. All right. So lesson number 9, and this is going to probably be the one that's a little bit harder for all of us to consistently do, is this idea of loving communication at all times. And loving communication is centered on your purpose and your intention for your conversations. Many of us, when we go into conversations with people that we love, and it is not necessarily an easy conversation, we are trying to get some kind of need met, or we're trying to connect. And then when it doesn't happen the way we want it to, then our communication it turns from being loving and mindful to being very mindless and unloving. And so what I want to provide for you is support around thinking about constantly, every single day, when you're having conversations with the people that you love in your life, and when you're trying to be a more loving person, what is your purpose or your intention with this conversation? Keeping that at the center will make it a little bit easier for you to make sure you're pushing through the conversation what actually matters most. Because many of us start to argue about things that are not even the most important aspect of the conversation, and it takes us off on a path that we don't want to go on. So continue to lean into loving communication. And if you're interested in a more in-depth conversation about that, I am going to be doing a workshop soon. Don't know when exactly, but also I did have an IG live where I did talk about some other tips that you can use in your everyday life. So go check that out. And let's move on to the very last tip. Lesson number 10. This is the last one. You deserve love. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to give love. And you need to trust, number 1, that you can give yourself the love that you deserve. And that from that space of you giving yourself the love that you deserve, leaning into what God has for you and the ways that God loves you, because your creator does love you, period. But also giving you will love from a space of overflow if you do that. And that is my biggest thing for you. I really want you to be loving from a space of overflow where you're trusting yourself, you're caring for yourself, you're leaning into yourself, you're forgiving yourself, right? You are acknowledging where you felt lovelessness and all these different things. And when you get to that space, you're now pouring into others from a space of overflow. And that's where you get into that community care space, which is so beautiful. And I call you all my loving community because you do pour into me and I pour into you, but I'm pouring from overflow, thankfully, And so this has been another conversation around mindful loving. I've had a great time. If there are other things, or if you want me to go deeper into any of these concepts or thoughts, definitely reach out to me. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, and let's move on to a couple of my announcements with Key, and then I'm gonna leave y'all alone on this Sunday, okay? So a couple of announcements. Make sure that you're texting and subscribing to 202-918-3255 because you can get some inspirational love and text and reminders through that, and some exclusive information for some upcoming workshops and things like that. Secondly, if you know of any schools or groups or anything like that that needs workshops and support around mindfulness, self-care, or community care, I am your lady. So make sure you reach out to me at my email address or on Instagram, and I will make sure I get back to you as soon as possible. And then lastly, make sure you are looking out for the next segment of Pack Light Workshop series, as well as some other offers I'm going to give to you very soon. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Kicking It with Key. And remember to cut the noise out of your life and live closer to purpose. And if you need a little help doing that, I can help you out, okay? Love y'all for real. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for another episode.